Imagine it's April 27th, 2011. You pick up your controller, you turn on your PlayStation 3, you try to sign in. Nothing. You try again, still nothing. You check the internet and realize it's not just you, it's everyone. 77 million people around the world are staring at the same screen, getting the same answer. Sony has gone dark. And what nobody knows yet, what Sony itself is only beginning to understand, is that somewhere in those servers, someone has already taken everything. Names, addresses, passwords, credit card numbers, all of it. Gone. The largest data breach in the history of the internet has already happened. The world just doesn't know it yet. All that and more on This Week in Video Game History. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Doug Coleman, and this week we are covering April 27th through May 3rd, a week that gave us the Wii Wheel, the most profitable entertainment launch in the history up to that point, a cult RPG that almost nobody bought and everybody loves, a Star Fox game that made your controller rumble for the very first time, the most emotionally devastating 3-day loop in Zelda history, the last great traditional chapter of a beloved RPG franchise that never quite got the send-off it deserved, any Bomberman game that had absolutely no business being a 3D platformer, and somehow had a fantastic soundtrack. Plus, Nintendo accidentally bought one of the greatest RPG studios alive for the price of a used car lot. 14 Halo players refused to let the servers die, and Sony had the worst week in the history of online gaming. So grab your controller, press start to continue. Here's what dropped during the week of April 27th through May 3rd across gaming history. 7 games, multiple decades, let's run it. Here's something that still blows my mind. The Wii Wheel. This little plastic steering wheel you snapped your Wiimote into was considered a serious control option, not a gimmick, an actual competitive choice, and people used it at tournaments. Mario Kart Wii launched in North America on April 27th, 2008, and it landed like a freight train. Nintendo packed a Wii wheel in every box and added bikes alongside carts for the very first time. Bumped the roster to 12 racers on the track simultaneously and introduced online play that actually worked. The result was the best-selling Mario Kart game in history, until its own sequel dethroned it years later. 100 million hours of online play logged before Nintendo shut those servers down in 2014. It remains one of the most beloved entries in the franchise, and if you grew up on it, you already know exactly which character you mained and exactly which item you prayed when it hit you on the final lap. 2 days after Mario Kart Wii, the entertainment industry got reminded just who is really in charge. Grand Theft Auto 4 launched worldwide on April 29th, 2008 and pulled in $310 million on its first day. First day. Within a week, it had crossed $500 million. The fastest any entertainment product, film or music included, had ever reached that number at the time. Rockstar had spent years building Liberty City, a version of New York so dense and alive, it felt less like a game world and more like a place. Niko Bellic's story was darker and more cinematic than anything the series had attempted before. Critics handed it perfect scores almost universally, and it validated that, once and for all, video games weren't just competing with other video games anymore. They were competing with everything. Nier is one of those games where the more you know about how it was made, the more miraculous it seems that it exists at all. Nier came to North America on April 27, 2010, developed by Kavia and published by Square Enix. Kavia was a studio best known for work-for-hire projects. Director Yoko Taro was, and remains, one of the most deliberately strange creative voices in the industry. The game sold modestly, critics were mixed, and then slowly, over years, people started talking about it. The story, a fighter fighting to save his daughter in a world that turns out to be far more broken and tragic than it first appears, hit differently on replay. The soundtrack, composed by Kiichi Okabe, is still considered one of the greatest in gaming history. Nier Automata arrived in 2017, introduced Yoko Taro to a massive new audience, and sent people back to the original in droves. What looked like a modest cult game in 2010 turned out to be the foundation of something remarkable. I want to be upfront with you. Star Fox 64 didn't land in North America until June 30th, 1997, but it launched in Japan on April 27th. And that date is worth marking because of what came with the game.
Message from General Pepper. Priority 1. We need your help, Star Fox!
Star Fox 64 is the reason your controller has ever rumbled. Nintendo packed the Rumble Pack peripheral with every copy. The first time a console game used haptic feedback as a standard part of the experience. Suddenly explosions had weight. Hits had impact. It changed what playing a game felt like. And every controller rumble you've felt since then traces back to this game. Beyond that, Star Fox 64 is a masterwork of arcade-style action, full of branching paths, memorable bosses, and voice acting so quotable it still echoes across the internet today. Do a barrel roll. We know. We love it. We're not sorry. April 27th, 2000. Japan again. And this time, it's something genuinely haunting. Majora's Mask launched in Japan on April 27th, 2000. Built in under 2 years by a small team reusing assets from the Ocarina of Time. It required the expansion pack. It came on a gold cartridge, and it was unlike anything Nintendo had released before or has released since. You have 3 days. The moon is falling. Every character in Clocktown has a schedule, a story, a life that plays out whether you're there or not. When time runs out, everything ends, and then you go back to the beginning and do it again. Majora's Mask is the rare Nintendo game that sits with you, that unsettles you, that asks something of you beyond reflexes and pattern recognition. The North American release followed in October. Both audiences eventually understood they were holding something special. Three games, one date. April 27th, 2000 in Japan was apparently a very good day to be at a game shop. Breath of Fire 4 launched in Japan alongside Majora's Mask on April 27th, 2000, developed and published by Capcom. It was the fourth entry in one of the most consistently underappreciated JRPG franchises in history. A series that never quite broke through to mainstream recognition, but built a devoted following that hasn't forgotten it. Breath of Fire 4 is widely considered the last great traditional entry in the series. The game that followed it, Dragon Quarter, was a radical departure from the formula that divided fans, and the series has been dormant in any meaningful way since. Gorgeous sprite work, a dual protagonist structure that gives you genuine sympathy for the villain. And when it made it to North America in November, it arrived quietly, and left quietly. Though not before Capcom's localization team made some notable cuts to the script and certain cutscenes that the Japanese version contained. If you ever wanted a window into how differently games were localized in that era, Breath of Fire 4 is an illuminating case study. And now our wild card. Our obscure platform pick, our what were they thinking, and also why does this soundtrack go so hard pick. Bomberman Hero launched in Japan on April 30th, 1998, developed by Hudson Soft for the Nintendo 64. Hudson looked at the Bomberman franchise, a series built entirely around multiplayer maze combat, and decided, what if we made it a 3D solo platformer with no multiplayer whatsoever? What if Bomberman just ran around, collected things? The reviews were middling, the concept was baffling, but composer Jun Chikuma delivered a soundtrack so unexpectedly good, trip-hop, backbeat, ambient electronica, that it developed a cult following completely independent of the game itself. Bomberman Hero is the rare case where the music outran the product. People who have never touched the game know that soundtrack. It's genuinely worth a listen if you've never heard it, and a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected places produce the most unexpected art. Here is a business transaction that in hindsight might be the greatest bargain in the history of the entertainment industry. On April 27, 2007, Nintendo announced it had acquired 80% of Monolith Soft from Namco Bandai. Monolith Soft was the studio behind the Xenosaga series, founded by Tetsuya Takahashi and a group of veterans who previously worked at Square. And the price Nintendo paid for this 80% stake? 75 million yen. At the time, that was roughly $627,000. For context, that is less than the cost of a modest house in a major American city. For that price, Nintendo got a studio of veteran RPG developers who were frustrated, creatively starved, and hungry to make something that mattered. The story of why they were available is worth telling. After Namco merged with Bandai in 2005, the creative atmosphere at Monolith changed. The person who had championed them, Namco president Masaya Nakamura, had retired. The new company was less willing to take risks. Monolith felt the walls closing in. Then Nintendo's Shinji Hatano reached out, and what he told them was simple. Go make something that can't be found anywhere in the industry. That became Xenoblade Chronicles, one of the most critically acclaimed Japanese RPGs ever made. A franchise that now spans 4 mainline quests, a studio whose fingerprints are quietly on nearly every major Nintendo game of the last 15 years. Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Animal Crossing New Horizons. $627,000. Not a bad return. April 15th, 2010, Microsoft shut down the original live servers. Every game that ran on that network went offline, including Halo 2. Except, not quite. A group of players had figured out something simple. If you were already signed in when the servers went dark, the network didn't immediately kick you. So they just stayed. They left their Xboxes running, they didn't log off, and as long as they kept playing, Halo 2 stayed alive. They called themselves the Noble 14. Microsoft noticed. The internet noticed. By April 27th, 12 days after the official shutdown, Kotaku was writing about them. People were tuning in to watch the streams. Fans were sending messages of support. Microsoft's own Xbox Live director tweeted at them, "We see you, and we salute you." Then Microsoft tried to bribe them. Early access to the Halo Reach beta. A peace offering. A way out. All but one refused. By April 30th, right in the middle of this very week, they were down to 12. The Noble 12. One by one, power outages, hardware failures, and exhaustion ended their runs. The last player standing was Apache N4 Sir. He finally went dark at 1:58 in the morning on May 11th, 2010, after 672 hours and 50 minutes of continuous play. 25 days after the servers were supposed to be dead, because 14 people loved the game enough to refuse to let it go. You heard it in the teaser. Here's what actually happened behind the scenes. Between April 17th and April 19th, 2011, hackers breached Sony's PlayStation Network servers. 2 days later, on April 20th, Sony took the entire network offline. No explanation, no timeline, just gone. The week of April 27th is when the full weight of it started to land. On April 27th, Sony confirmed in a blog post that a criminal investigation was underway, and quietly acknowledged that personal information from approximately 77 million accounts may have been compromised. Names, addresses, email addresses, dates of birth, passwords, possibly credit card numbers. 77 million accounts. It was at that moment the largest data security breach in the history of the internet. On May 1st, Sony announced a welcome back program. Free games, free PlayStation Plus, an apology. On May 2nd, the other shoe dropped. Sony Online Entertainment had also been breached. Another 24.7 million accounts. To understand how this happened, you have to go back further. In January 2011, a hacker named George Hotz, known online as GeoHot, had jailbroken the PlayStation 3 firmware and shared it publicly. Sony sued him. The hacker collective Anonymous launched Operation Sony in retaliation. And while Anonymous publicly stood down, claiming they didn't want to hurt consumers, someone else was already inside Sony's servers. The outage lasted 23 days. It changed how every major gaming company thinks about online security. And it's a reminder that tens of millions of people plug into the same network. The stakes of getting it wrong are very, very high. Imagine it's April 27th, 2011. A Sony engineer is staring at a screen watching 77 million accounts disappear into the dark. He doesn't know how long it'll take to fix. He doesn't know yet how many people are affected. He just knows something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. 3 floors away from where he's sitting, metaphorically speaking, 14 people are hunched over their Xboxes, refusing to let a dead game die. And in a boardroom of Kyoto, Nintendo is quietly signing paperwork that will eventually produce some of the greatest games ever made for less than a price of a house. The same week, the same 7 days. That's what this show is all about. Not just the launches and the sales numbers and the perfect review scores, though we do love all those. It's about the full picture. The engineers, the hackers, the dreamers who wouldn't log off. The RPG studio that got rescued for $627,000. The game that shipped on a dying console and broke everyone's heart in 3 days. The whole messy, magnificent history of the medium we love. Be sure to save your game, nerds. I'll see you next week.